Welcome to USAII, AI Expert Talks, where we speak with technology innovators, leaders, and practitioners shaping the future of AI. And I'm your host, Mike Speath, and today's conversation is going to be a little different because we're going to focus less on the technology behind AI and something that ultimately will determine whether AI succeeds in an organization. And that is the human side of AI, turning resistance into readiness. So today we're joined by Ren Chang, co-founder and chief emergence alchemist at Interlock Infinity. Ren Chang works with organizations to help leaders navigate change, build stronger teams, and create cultures where innovation can thrive. Passionate about the human side of transformation, Ren Chang builds a unique perspective on how organizations can successfully adopt AI by focusing not just on the technology, but on people, leadership, culture, and meaningful change. And today we're going to hit all of those topics. So Ren Chang, welcome to Expert Talks. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm glad to be here.
So why do so many actually, AI transformation initiatives struggle, even when the technology itself works?
So I think most of the time when we talk about the technology actually works, right? Like it's really because the technology is already there, but more often than not, I think folks are actually not solving the right problem, or they're solving the wrong problem itself. I can give you an example. I was just thinking about a client that I work with, right?
Yes.
And I was doing some other client work for them, but they were just telling me this story about how they literally spend like close to like 2 million, right? Just to automate some dashboards, and it's meant for reporting to the board, right? And I was like, wow, do you really need 2 million just to automate some dashboards for the board? And I mean, I was curious, right? So I was just asking a lot more questions, and they told me that things are automated, it's easier for the board. So anytime when the board actually needs those reports or wants to see the numbers very quickly, everything's actually pre-populated. But then when I started talking to the people who were actually kind of like preparing the data to actually be kind of uploaded into the dashboard, it was interesting that they told me that like before this automated dashboard, they were doing quite a number of manual work. With this automated dashboard, they said that they have to do 2 times the work. And I was like, really? 2 times the work? Then I say, what kind of automation is this? And it was surprising because they were saying that they also had to prepare the data in a way that it can actually be consumed by the dashboard itself, right? So it's almost like twice the work they actually have to do. And I think for me, it was just interesting because when the client shared with me this example, I was thinking like, yeah, maybe they had an idea of what they want to achieve at the end of the day. But then the question is like, have we actually spent the time to also talk to the people who are actually doing the actual work? And how this piece of work, right, we could even, like, for example, invite them to kind of co-design the solution rather than say that, hey, we're gonna like, introduce this automated dashboard, and everyone else, you just need to just adopt it and just do it. And I think that's why I think most of the time, even with any of this AI initiative or AI transformation initiative, it's a lot top from the top, telling people that you just need to do this, but most of the time people just don't know what it is, and they struggle. AI is supposed to actually help us with simplifying our work and make our lives slightly a little bit more easier. Yeah.
Well, 2 times the work for $2 million is too much, right? So when you have that sunk cost, how do you determine ROI after the project is complete?
Yeah. So interestingly, for that project, what I heard from the client is that when you're talking about ROI, and of course, because with projects of this kind of size, they always have a project post-implementation review, so kind of like calculating the ROI as well. What they then focus more on is the turnaround time, like how fast they could actually get those reports or get those automated dashboards versus before actually having those dashboards available to the board. So the focus was more of the turnaround time of how fast they got it versus also then taking into account how much more extra time and effort actually it was actually needed to actually create the dashboard, right? And I think with
Hmm.
many organizations, once you actually spend the amount of money, you have to justify the ROI. So then it's probably like telling part of the story and not a part of the story, right? So part of the story to kind of also justify that, hey, the investment actually made sense.
Well, do you feel like a real-time dashboard could have been accomplished 5 or 10 years ago with APIs, or do you feel that AI can definitely make it more real-time, more accurate, and probably instead of 2 times the work, make it one tenth the work?
Yeah.
Is that even possible as a project?
Yeah. So I definitely think that it is definitely possible even before AI to actually come
Yeah.
up with dashboards and having APIs directly connected to it, right? Yeah, even with the data piece as well, I'm just thinking out loud. There could have been a way that I don't know, like for that project where they thought about like, building actual data pipelines that make sense, that automate this whole process, where they don't actually have to manually extract it, massage the data, and then upload it like manually. I think with AI nowadays, what I've also seen for dashboards, and also something that this client was also telling me, is that they are right now thinking like instead of just with dashboards where you can actually see the numbers up there,
Hmm.
I think the experiments that they're running these days are more about so what do the numbers actually mean? So using Gen AI to
Right.
be able to kind of
Okay.
analyze or do an initial analysis of what do they actually see in the dashboards, and to even like highlight if there are certain things that are things that some the reader actually needs to take note of, for example, right? So the Gen AI piece kind of helps in kind of making sense of what the dashboard's actually telling you, versus like you
Mm.
just see a dashboard with the numbers and the colors and all that kind of stuff. But for some readers, they might not really understand like what does this actually mean. And with Gen AI, you can also definitely what do you call this? Like take multiple data points from the dashboard and kind of like make sense out of it. So it's almost like giving you a first cut of an analysis, right? Analyst kind of making analysis and then
Right.
sharing that with you. Yeah.
Well, that is definitely exciting because I thought, okay, we solved real-time dashboards. We solved dashboards that take into consideration multi-data sets, but being able to use Gen AI to provide analysis is a great success story. Now, can you share with us other success stories that you've worked on with other customers in Gen AI or using LLMs without naming the customer, of course?
Yeah. So I think with another I think this is not a specific client, but maybe like an example of a friend that actually work in a in a technology company, right? Um, and they use LLM quite a lot, Gen AI quite a lot, right? So one thing that they have been doing, and this is specifically in the marketing function, right, or the e-commerce function, digital marketing, e-commerce function, is that they are trying to see like, what else can we actually build on our own to be able to get more customers, and also thinking around like conversion as well. Like, so even though they actually have
Mm.
customers coming to their websites, to their apps, the question is like, how can I actually convert? And my friend was telling me about it. Because of AI, what tends to actually happen is, or what has happened in their company is that they have literally slash headcounts. So initially they had like a bigger team, and literally I think was it just a couple of months ago, they just like, cut the workforce in that team by 50%. And I was like, whoa, okay, that was interesting. And the direction was apparently to actually use AI to kind of enable the work that they're doing. And the push is to really, really actually use AI to do whatever that they need to be doing, automate as much as possible and all that kind of stuff. And when I was talking to her, asking about like what are the different like KPIs or measures. So right now, as much as they're actually kind of like measuring how much tokens that you're using on AI, but at the same time, I think eventually they were also she was telling me that they are definitely looking at driving outcomes as well. So there needs to be some business outcomes tied to it, versus just right now. I mean, at a high level, they're just looking at individual employee, how many tokens that you're using. But yeah, she was saying
Right.
the road definitely looking at driving outcomes.
Yeah, and that unfortunately is hopefully not part of the real-time dashboard to say has how many people have we laid off. And I know you're really focused on thinking about the people who
Yeah.
not only have to use it, but potentially the people who can be reassigned to other projects. So in this case, in other cases, how are you seeing people, or how are you seeing your customers also focus on the people?
I think more often than not, I've definitely seen clients where they say they wanted to do, like, an automation project, they want to do an AI project. And for them, the starting point is always the technology,
Right.
rather than, how do we actually like solve like a very specific problem, right? I'm just thinking about maybe an example that I can share. This was back when I was working in a bank, about a couple of years
Mhm.
back. And one of the things that I still remembered, as much as I was leading the innovation lab in the bank, specifically for the risk management team, and as much as we wanted to introduce AI, or at the point even we were starting baby steps, so we started with machine learning models. So even at that point in time, the question was, not to just push machine learning models out there, but the question is like, what is it that we really want to solve, and what is that business problem that it's worth solving at the end of the day, right? So for example, one of the use cases that we really thought about that would really make sense was that we started off with thinking about, in the bank, we have all these different customers, and they will be customers that are more likely to become fraud victims. So we were wondering, like, is there a way that we could actually build like a machine learning model to kind of help predict or at least profile our customers and see which customers are more likely to become victims, like fraud victims, right? Victims of fraud.
Sure.
And therefore, if we know they are more likely to become victims, like what can we do as a bank, like more proactively as a bank, what we can do to kind of help safeguard our customers, because again, our customers trust us with their money.
Wow.
Then the question, then it's
Sure.
really about like what can we do more proactively to actually safeguard them, right? And from that project, after we kind of like we built the machine learning model, we did a pilot, and then subsequently we actually implemented it. I think what was interesting was that we actually saw an uplift of about 10 to 15%. And this is actually in addition to whatever other controls that we already have. So it kind of like helped us get better at safeguarding our customers. And yeah, of course, there were like a
Mhm.
couple of million kind of like saved from fraud as well. And and I think after that project actually kind of took off, then the question was like, what are the business case, or what are use cases can we actually continue on, right? So this was one of the more meaningful use cases that we actually built, and yeah, and from what I understand, like
Wow.
till today is actually being used, yeah. And of course, like every other 6 months,
Oh, that's
so that I
exciting.
can kind of like refresh it, kind of like double checking, just in case there's any data drift. But yeah, from what I understand, they are still using it there, and also they will continue kind of enhancing it as well. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's an exciting use case. I've spent time working with anti-money laundering and KYC,
Mhm.
knowing your customer. Now, with LLMs and Gen AI, how could you enhance that project of decreasing fraud
Yeah.
in this use case? Do you think
Yeah.
it's any ways to uh, make it better?
I think with Gen AI or LLMs for this use case, potentially, yeah. I mean, again, it very much again depends on the data sources that we are actually using at the end of the day,
Yeah.
right? I think when we actually started the project, we were also very mindful, like we didn't actually wanted to kind of like use all sorts of data and try to like prepare as much data as possible to build a model. So even when we first
Right.
started with this specific use case, it was just focused more on the internet banking and mobile banking data that we had. Also because those data sets are a little bit more structured, a little more clean, I think the plan, I still remember when we were talking about it in the early stages, we were saying like, let's start small and start with data sets that are clean and easy to use, that we can kind of build something and experiment and see whether it works. I think then the plan subsequently was to kind of expand it to like other products that we have. So for example, like your credit
Sure.
cards, your loans, and so on and so forth, right? If since you talk about LLMs, I think at that point in time, the only thing that we were thinking about is that perhaps we could actually pair it up with an LLM or Gen AI, more in the sense of actually doing the analysis piece. So how, because
Mm,
again, it actually predicts all this and profile all these different customers, right? But sometimes if you want to actually pull together like an analyst report of, where our
yeah.
customers are and what does it actually mean, and then what else can we actually do to help change the behaviors, even for example, for our customers, could LLMs or could Gen AI kind of help in that sense, right? Something we did think about, but I think at that
Right.
point in time, I think LLMs were still very, very much, I think, new to the
Yeah.
market. Like not many people were talking about it. Uh, yeah. So at that point, I think I still remember there was a use case we used NLP for it, but definitely nowhere close to an
Right.
LLM because it wasn't as dependable as it was. So we did experiment with some use cases, but yeah, nowhere close to what
Right.
LMs can do these days. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe, AI can help get a better understanding why the customers fell into this bucket or what data sets could be used that aren't that will enhance the ability to determine who was victim of fraud.
Yeah.
But that sounds like not only a use case, but you could start a whole company with that with, with that
Yeah,
concept.
you definitely could, for sure. I mean, even before we started with that experiment and with that project, right, we were already talking to some of our vendors out there. And yeah, like, many of them would actually share that, yeah, they would have a system, it's AI powered and all that. The only thing was that, when we actually ask them for a little more details, most of the time we actually get like a black box, so we don't really know what's really in there. And, would it be helpful? I think that's why also there was a decision to, build it in-house because then we know like
Yeah.
what's really happening and we can actually explain the results. Even share it with management and even to the board as well. Yeah.
So you've been in these situations many times, like you described. What are some of the criteria you look at to determine build versus buy?
Um, yeah. So I would say if you think about build versus buy, more often than not, I don't know. I always think about like what is the cost to actually build versus actually buy. Because sometimes
Right.
I think it's just cheaper to actually buy, yeah, cheaper to just actually buy a solution off the shelf. I think if it's actually fit for
Sure.
purpose. But sometimes,
Mhm.
there are certain solutions that you think about it, like it just makes a lot more sense to actually build internally for, whatever
Yep.
purpose that you need to use it for, rather than just buy something off the shelf. I mean, I can give you a very specific example. Um, so back in the bank, one of the things that I was also leading in the bank was specifically focused on culture, specifically on risk culture. And I think the initial piece, things that we were working on was also looking at like dashboards and metrics, right? So yeah, we went around the market and kind of
Mhm.
also look into, are there any other existing solutions out there, right? So there were many solutions out there that relates to, dashboards and, automated reports and so on and so forth. But there was nothing specific that relates back to culture and what more risk culture, right? So
Right.
if we were to kind of like buy that piece of software out there, then it's just, I mean, a lot of the thinking or thought process behind it, we still have to actually do it on our own. So even for that,
Sure.
we decided like, you know what, we are not just going to buy any system or software out there and then later to figure out
Mhm.
how to configure it. It just made more sense at that point in time to actually build. When we started out with it was
Right.
just with Power BI, right? And again, like the
Mhm.
definition of the metrics and the thresholds and whatever it is, It was kind of like internally decided, and then we kind of built it and just use it for whatever we need to actually use it for to kind of like cultivate risk culture, right? Rather than
Mhm.
yeah, in the market where we're like, yeah, who
Right.
else can actually do this for us? And most of the time, and sadly, most of the time, a lot of the technology vendors, I think they focus more on the technology piece of it rather than
Oh,
the actual content that we actually need help with. Yeah.
yeah. Well, with build versus buy, is it easier now in the age of AI to build?
Yeah, definitely. I think with AI right now, I think it's a lot easier to build. I think right now there's just so many prototyping tools out there, right? Or even with LLMs. I was just talking to this friend of mine who um doesn't even, and is not so comfortable with computers or even like coding or any programming language. And then she was
Right.
just telling me that she just, spoke to an LLM and then told the LLM, like, this is exactly what I wanted for my website. And then, the LLM would just churn out all the code. And what she needed to do is just copy, paste it, right, into the web hosting platform, and then the website is up, right? And I think the only thing that needs to happen is, of
Right.
course, you just still need to test. But then again, like for what she needed to do was, yeah, I don't need to code. I just need to type whatever it is that I needed. And then, there's a lot of back and forth and checking like whether it actually makes sense and then push it out, right? But then again, I think for example, like this is a very a more like basic use case. It's not as high impact or impact like another person's life because it's just a website, right? Versus when I think about let's say if we were to use an LLM, let's say for the fraud use case that I was talking about that impacts our customers, then I think there still needs to be a
Mhm.
check and balance, right? So I did actually ask my data scientist who was actually building the machine learning model, like, did you actually use an LLM to kind of help you bounce off ideas, especially with the coding piece, because they were coding in Python? And they said, yeah, of course, right? Because that's almost like a plot buddy to kind of help them
Right.
kind of think through a little bit more about codes or snippets of code. So it's not like the whole piece of code is actually in the LLM. So it's more like snippets of codes that they just needed to bounce off ideas with. And yeah, and that was helpful for them, right? When it came to actually building their machine learning model.
Yeah. Well, I can remember sitting at a table 25 plus years ago, and the customer was a large bank, and there were multiple consultants in the room, and they quoted a website for the large bank at $20 million. And the bank said, wow, we were expecting 30 million to create a new website. And now that anybody can do that for close to free.
Yeah, yeah,
So
close to
there's a use
free.
case for you.
Yeah, close to free. And I think these days what they call it is like vibe coding the whole thing. So you just share
Yeah.
like what is the vibe that you want. And then it's like fingers crossed, like something would actually come out, like the website would actually come out, kind of like fitting in the vibes that you kind of actually told the LLM like what exactly that you actually are looking for. Yeah.
Yeah. In this case, I think we spent 6 months on performing the checkout application
Oh,
for a credit card. So, and I realized that those meetings and the project that the 20 consultants at the table listening were all billable hours. So
yeah.
that's where every meeting was probably 10 grand, and that's where the 20 million dollars went. But do you think there's an issue of employees at a corporation
Mhm,
doing, let's say, subject matter experts, teaching the AI, building out the workflow, that in the
mhm.
end, it could replace their position? Do you think there should be a concern from employees, or this is great for employees because it enable them to focus on the to-do lists that
Mhm.
is a mile long and they've never gotten to?
Yeah. I think for employees, especially if they're experts, right? I don't know, like sometimes I think about it, it's not going to be as easy as it is to actually teach someone or even teach AI like how to do some of these things. Because when you think about
Right.
what AI is at the end of the day, what it does is especially with Gen AI, it's literally just predicting the next possible word, right?
Right.
And as much as you can actually dump all your knowledge and try to teach it as much as possible. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think at least not at this point in time where AI is still able to actually reason like a human being, at least not
Right.
yet, right? Especially for very technical or very areas of specialization. So I was just thinking around
Hmm.
back in when I was actually with the risk management team. Um, and of course, those were the early days of LLM, right? So even when we were experimenting to try to actually train an AI, to be a risk analyst, and we are talking like just like
Right.
a very junior risk analyst, right? Just thinking about an equivalent of just graduating from university, doesn't know much about risk management, and we're trying to actually teach it risk management and how to do an
Right.
analysis of it. It was tough. Like it was just spitting out things that just didn't really make sense at a point in time. Now I don't know. Maybe it has got better, right? And when I say like when I was experimenting with it, it was about maybe at a year and a half or 2 years ago, right? But I'm sure right now, a lot of it actually has advanced. I think more often than not, the other aspect I was always thinking about is that AI is only as good as the data that you actually input it, right? But more often
Sure.
than not, in an organization, if you think about SMEs, they work with a lot of different types of people.
Yep.
And I was also thinking, like, one of the other important skills, I mean, for any employees, like especially the more senior that you are, is to actually manage stakeholders. And this
Right.
all information of all these different stakeholders, like, there's no way you can kind of like put everything in
No.
AI, right? There's certain nuances about certain people, and nor do you really want to put everything in AI, right? Because that's the last thing you
Right.
want it to be an AI, and the
Right.
information is just gets leaked out and all that kind of stuff. So I don't I
Well,
don't think so. Yeah. So maybe
yeah.
the subject matter expert can train like a junior analyst, but maybe not to the level of,
Mhm.
like what they can do actually in an organization.
Yeah, and you've hit on a topic I've been thinking about a lot lately is what if in 10 years this it comes to the conclusion that this is just a really good word predictor. Um, we spent all this time and money,
Yep.
and
Yep.
at the end of the day, it just, Jack and Jill rolled up the and it fills in the hill, right? Do you think there's a chance that that could happen?
Yeah, that could potentially happen, to be honest. But I would also say that even though it actually, if I mean, right now, I think it's already happening, right? But I think right now, I think what how a lot of folks are trying to kind of also get better or use the AI to get better at that prediction is to actually train the AI with, whatever like knowledge base that they actually have. So it's actually
Right.
within the context of that specific knowledge base or whatever else that they're talking about. So it's always a little more contextual rather than
Mhm.
just predicting like the next possible word, like I don't know, in the general world or whatever it is, right? Yeah. But since you talk about nursery rhymes like Jack and Jill, I think very likely, AI is going to be able to predict that quite fairly quickly. Yeah. Versus when it comes to very specialized areas, right? Or very technical areas, that's not as straightforward. That's what I think about. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's not many science fiction novels that in their last chapter said AI in the end was just a word predictor.
But we'll
But
see,
like,
right? We'll see in
I
the next
know,
couple of years. Yeah.
what would it need to become more? Does it need more reasoning? Does it need more inference? Does it need more data?
Um, I mean, with AI, I mean in general with AI, I mean everyone says that it definitely needs a lot more data, like because again, how it actually predicts the next possible word or whatever it needs to predict, right, is actually based on data, and data is actually based on what actually has happened in the past, right? So unless you actually input new data in, it's going to just tell you like, this is what we have seen the pattern or the trend in the past, and that's why I'm actually telling you this specific word, right?
Right.
I think what I'm thinking out loud right now, it's more about, we know that AI is going to be here for the longer term. I think
Yeah.
the more important question is, um, how do we actually, get people or employees in the organization to actually embrace AI? I think also like how do we
Mhm.
actually enable them to actually use AI? So it's almost like thinking about I don't know, this is about maybe like 30, 40 years ago, like the days where um the internet just first started, or the days where no one actually was, I mean, everyone was still learning how to use a computer, right?
Mhm.
And it was, I think at that point in time, it was a tool, like, using a computer, like, oh, okay, it can actually help me do what I need. And then for the internet, when the internet came out, it was like, oh, the internet enables me to actually, look for all these different references or resources that's actually out there, help me connect to different
Right.
individuals around the world, right? I think right now, at least for the past couple of years, there's a lot of promises of what AI can do, or what Gen AI can do specifically. And I think people are getting a little bit more I don't know, attuned, or kind of get a better understanding, like, hey, I don't really think it can actually do whatever, people have been talking about it, right? They're getting a bit more realistic in terms of what AI can.
Mm.
And I think right now is I think the focus is, as much as it's about training people, onboarding people to use AI, I think what's more helpful is to kind of help them use it like a bit more efficiently or more effectively to solve like a
Mhm.
specific problem, right? Like it's like, what is the problem that we're trying to solve, rather than like, how many tokens did you actually use for this month? And did you actually hit the quota of tokens that you're supposed to actually use, right? So I
Mhm.
would say like focus on like what is the problem we want to solve, and then how do we actually enable our people to actually solve it. So it's really about building capability of people to solve problems, but using AI as one of the tools, rather than building capability of people to just use AI, right? Like, so, some people folks who just go for training on AI tools, right?
Mhm.
And then expecting them to, perform miracles with AI. Versus, I think it's more important to reframe the training as like, how do I get people to solve problems? But AI is just one of the tools that can actually help me solve the problem.
Yeah, and obviously the proprietary data from a corporation can enhance the LLM. What other data types? Like, is there data specifically? Is there data from the real world outside of words that can help the models? Obviously, can help with autonomous vehicles and humanoid robots. But is there other data sets, but multimodal data sets that could help improve the models, or is it just robotics?
I think it still goes back at the end of the day, like what is the use case? Like what is the business problem that we
Right.
actually wanted to solve, right? So I think once that is clear, or at least, kind of like that's like the starting point, thinking about, hey, if this is the problem that we want to solve, then only think about what are the data sets that we actually need to use or need to actually have, right? Because I still remember in my early days when I was experimenting with machine learning models, right? Yeah, and even when we were actually scoping experiments, which I then learned right now, at that point in time, because I was so new in that space as well, the first question I always ask is like, so what data do we actually have? And like, what data, what
Right.
voluminous data that we actually have that we can actually build a machine learning model. And after that experience, I then realized that that's not the right question to ask, because you can actually have all this data, but if this data doesn't actually help you solve like a specific problem, or at least a
Mm.
problem that your stakeholders care about enough to say like, yes, we want to work
Yeah.
on this, it's just gonna be like, hey, we've got all this data, we're gonna like build like an AI or a machine learning model out of it, and then it's gonna solve like for whatever like this little problem, right? But then again, like if the problem is not something that your stakeholders care about, like
Right.
it's just a good exercise that people have just done, right? Rather than starting
Yeah.
with the problem. So I think, at least from what I've learned, is I think it's so important to start with the problem first, and then only think about like
Right.
what are the data sets that we actually need to use, and they might be data that might not be available at this point in time, or at least it's not available in a way that you can actually use with AI, right?
Right.
So then I think even so, I still remember with some of the use cases that I did later on. I think is the
Hmm.
question is like, can we kind of like scope it down to what are some
Right.
of the essential data sets that we at least have access to at this point in time that we can use, right? It's almost like a minimum viable
Yeah.
data set that we can use to start building like a model or start building it with AI. And then I think when we can showcase that it works, right, then we can actually further kind of expand it and make it a lot better. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know you uh, used the word black box, and I was there early days of machine learning, and a lot of it was black box. But the way I think about AI, in general, it's a black box because you
Hmm.
really don't know how it came up with that answer. And, how can that be solved, right? I know they're saying, okay, we looked at this site, this site, this site,
Hmm.
but, will it ultimately be a black box because we really don't know how it came up with that answer?
Yeah. Um, I would still think like LLMs are still gonna be a black box. Um,
Right.
I I don't know which tech company is gonna be open enough to eventually one day decide to kind of like open up and share that, hey, this is how exactly the model actually works, right? Their large
Right.
language model works. So I think it's still gonna be a black box. But like you said, Mike, I think what would be helpful is that even though it is a black box, even though it actually predicts, the next best word, or even actually tells you like, hey, this is what it recommends, or this is the analysis it actually did. I think the
Right.
closest what we have seen so far is it actually references like, where it actually got the source of
Yeah.
information from, right? And I think that's what a lot of people also say to also make sure that whatever AI actually outputs, you have like a human in the loop, right? Or at least a human
Mhm.
person kind of reviewing the output before it actually goes out. So I think that still stays, and that's still important. So it's almost like a check and balance as well, right? So yeah, because at the end of the day, you still need
Mhm.
an expert to actually verify to know whether like something that actually goes out it actually makes sense, especially when it comes to, I don't know, like I'm just thinking out loud, any use cases that actually has like really really high impact to to human beings at the end of the day. So I'm thinking around like industries, for example financial services for sure, healthcare,
Mhm.
anything to do with security of of
Sure.
yeah of the nation of the country. So yeah, I think in those industries, I think it's even more important that that there needs still be a person kind of like reviewing whatever the outputs that's actually coming from AI.
Yeah, and I think at the end too is when we figure out how it's coming up with this information and kind of crack the code on the black box will enable us to use humans and experts to take it to the next level. So almost like I've been thinking that, we need more data, right? We need more GPUs.
Hmm.
But I think at the end, it's going to be a human that figures out how to crack that code with the black box and improve it dramatically. That could get us beyond the word predictor. So the question is, do you have you worked with people that you think were close to cracking the black box or came up with an original idea that said, oh, okay, what if we tried this? Um, so yeah, have you run into that? In the end, is the human going to figure this out?
Yeah. So I have not actually read into anyone who actually wants to actually crack this black box yet, not yet. At least most of the folks that I'm actually speaking to. I
Yeah.
think right now, yeah, like what they're trying to do is use AI as a tool to actually solve problems, solve business problems, solve problems that they're facing in the organization, right? Be it getting better at, getting more customers on board, or being like thinking about how can they actually increase revenue. So I think it's more about like business problems that are trying to solve, rather than yeah, like trying to actually crack the black box. But having said that, I don't know, maybe they might be some folks in, who are just doing research specifically in the research space that, that's a good, I don't know, an exercise or something that they really, really want to do and interested in, like, hey, what's really inside there and how can I actually make it even better, for example, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think in the end, it's going to be research that takes us to the next level, right? Like I drive down the street, especially in some rural areas, I just see, I some days I pass 20 data centers, right? And
Mhm.
makes sense, right? More processing power,
Yeah.
better model, more data, better model. But in the end, I believe that a human on the research side could solve the way we make it above and beyond a word predictor. So, are there any thought leaders, blogs, books that you can recommend to enable us to kind of think about it in a different way?
Sorry. Yeah. Since we're talking about um yeah, like books and all that. So I think it's also because my background is actually in design thinking. So one of the books
Yep.
I would think about recommending, there's this book called Change by Design, is written by Tim Brown.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it's not a book about AI.
Oh,
It's about design thinking, right? But I think what matters most is that how you could actually use design thinking in navigating complexity. So when you think about AI, it's also very complex topics. It's a very complex issue in itself. And even talk about adoption, for
right,
example, right? So then the question is that how do I use design, right? Or co-design, inviting people to co-design, like what's the solution at the end of the day, right? Um, Even though there are like a lot of books about AI out there these days, I
yes,
always feel that some of the solutions that we are looking for when it comes to AI actually are not from the books that, yeah, are written about AI. I think the solutions that we need,
yep,
most of the time, it lies in books that are not about AI. And I think the question is like learning from those books, right? How can I then
right.
use what I've learned in those, in those spaces to be able to bring it into the application of AI, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm, hitting on design, maybe Steve Jobs was right. Maybe Apple is
Yeah.
right for not jumping into the trillions of dollars spent on building out data centers and procuring data. Maybe they were right because they have the design
Mhm.
of the devices that make it easier for us. And by doing nothing and focusing on design, they'll win at the end of the day. So thank you. I mean, looking for things outside because I listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of it is buzz, you know, what happened today, who bought who acquired,
Mhm.
who spent, what's the stock price. So, that can be, that can be a, kind of a just a lot of noise out there. But let's say, if you were to give career advice to students or people early in their careers, considering all the, recent shifts and shifts over the years, where do you think they should spend their time and effort as someone who's just beginning their career?
Yeah. So this is an interesting question is also because I was literally talking to some friends who actually teach at the university like a couple weeks back, and
Oh,
they were telling me like how there's a shift because like 20 years ago, yeah, about 20 years ago, um, a lot of students would actually enroll into the engineering school But right now, literally, the enrollment in the engineering school has actually dropped significantly, and there's a lot
Wow.
more students actually enrolled to actually study AI or programming or computer science, right? So like this is the next big
Mm,
thing. So I would say that I think generally like folks are really moving towards this space, like wanting to learn a little bit more about this space, about AI, about computer science, and so on and so forth. But I would say like and I would say like someone who's actually starting their career or early parts of their career, I think what's most important is to be able to differentiate themselves. And it's not the easiest to actually differentiate yourself if you are only good like the technical side of stuff, like which is, for
mm,
example, being able to code really, really well. I mean, yeah, they might be like really, really strong coders, but I think what would really differentiate, again, it's like stuff that you can actually do with AI. So, for example, like, being able to understand business problems, understanding the business, right?
mhm.
Even I would even think about like even asking questions. How do we actually ask better questions,
Right.
right? More often than not, I think with AI, right, most of the time, we're just actually looking just for answers. But sometimes I think what's more important as a starting point is
Mhm,
like what are some of the better questions that we can ask, or what's a really good question that we can ask? Because again, a question actually helps frame the problem. And actually, if we do actually ask like, better
mhm,
questions, it actually frames the problem in a certain aspect or certain way that kind of like launches into a certain trajectory of, how we actually want to be solving the problem. Yeah. So I would still say it's still more like the softer side of stuff that probably you can really learn from, I don't know, from like a technical course at the university. Yeah. So I still say focus on that piece for sure. But at the same time, I wouldn't say just totally ignore anything that is out there in terms of AI, right? I would say just be very comfortable using it and embracing it,
mhm.
but also focus more on the softer side of stuff, right? The soft skills. Yeah. I mean, an example was just the ability to actually ask better questions.
Ren Chang, thank you so much for your time today. I know that there are so many big takeaways, and I really enjoyed that we focused on the big picture. And you got me thinking about a lot of things that I've been thinking about already, but you gave me a different perspective. So I think it was also helpful for our listeners. So yeah, Ren Chang, thank you so much for sharing your perspective, and to everyone listening, thank you for joining us for another podcast on AI experts, and we'll see you in the next one.
All right. Thank you.